what's up? It is your girl Mo with the Core Creative Podcast. I don't think y'all can see me, but I got my little plug up here now. I'm trying to evolve with every interview. I'm trying to get a little better. Y'all, I know I say this with every podcast, but I am so excited. I'm for real this time. I am so excited for today's guest, y'all. This woman puts the soul into your soul. She is the most creative, talented, voice like butter. Nobody like it. And I don't think I know anybody with more sex appeal on this earth. And I am so hyped. I have known this woman since I was 13, 14 years old. And I am excited to introduce her to all of you and to be able to share. I've been greedy for the last, I won't say how many years, because y'all don't mind your business.
Right. Mind your business.
A long time. But I'm so excited to be able to share this beautiful night with the world. Everybody, please welcome Miss Teri Tobin to the podcast.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. It is an honor to be here with you. Oh my gosh.
Oh my, it's a long time coming.
It has been
coming. I said, I got to be creative and figure out how I can get you on the phone or at least see your face.
Yes. Whatever we got to do, right?
Whatever we have to do. All right. So without further ado, please share a little bit about yourself, who you are, what you do.
So I am an Arizona native. I started out, of course, like most folks, singing in church. Mm-hmm. And my journey took me from Arizona to California. That's where I got the bug. I should say the show business bug. I was always singing every single commercial and every single theme song. You know, back then the theme songs for TV shows were the thing.
They were lit.
But I did it like without even knowing I was doing it. It was just like second nature. And then, I did some charity work and performed with different groups and choirs and stuff that actually gave me the opportunity to perform with a lot of icons. Mm-hmm. And then my very first professional gig was singing background for Jeffrey Osborne.
Wow.
And prior to then, though, like I said, I sing in church and I sing in all these other activities, but I never really thought of it as a career. I was just like, I just love to do it. Mm-hmm. When I got that first check, that changed my view. Like, wow, I can do this. I can do this and get paid. Like, yes. I didn't know. And so that started on the journey of me, doing background vocals and demo sessions for people, working with various producers, and then starting to hone my skills as a songwriter, but not as much until I got to Howard University, that is.
HU. Hate you, huh?
And so when I got there, even though I was studying classical voice, I met a lot of different people that were, obviously budding artists and, and different things. And of course, on the campus at the same time as Taraji P. Henson, not to name drop, but as I talk about Howard, I always think about, I always had these visions of what it was like to walk on campus and walking into the fine arts building, and the people you would see are people like Taraji. And so for, to see that kind of thing, every time I talk about it, I can't help but mention, because I'm extremely proud of her and of course my time at Howard. But I met with some people. A friend of mine, Scotty Beats, God rest his soul, was instrumental in encouraging me to write my own stuff, because up until that point, I had always kind of just sang whatever people gave me. Mm-hmm. And so part of the challenge with that is they'd want me to sound like so-and-so, like, oh, this is going to be the next Toni Braxton or the next Whitney Houston or whatever. And don't get me wrong, I love those artists, but I'm like, I'm Teri Tobin. So I'd like to be able to, find ways to kind of get my own sound. And so that's what I started doing when I was at Howard. And some years passed, ended up back in California. And then came motherhood. And then it became, okay, well, how am I gonna do this? Because they always say, like, if you're in school, especially, or you're doing something, and as you become a mother, like, that's the end of your dreams, so to speak, because your focus should be your child, and it absolutely should be. However, it took me a while to finally kind of find that balance, to be able to still be, mommy, and still be able to feed my dreams, even if it was piecemeal. So I found ways to do that, and ever since then, my first independent album that I put out myself was in 2011, Love Infinity, and I am working on my fifth project now, and I guess they say the rest is history. I don't know, like, I that's like obviously the Cliff Notes version,
Yeah.
but that's how I got here.
So I have about 50 questions just based upon the explanation that you just gave me. I just want to take my notes and just throw them out the window. Okay, so we'll start with, you've been in the game clearly for a
Yes.
very, very, very long time. You've been doing
Yes,
this forever.
ma'am.
Like I said, you started your first album drop was 2011, but you were doing this for years.
Yes,
Years
years prior to that.
at that point. And there are so many of us that are out there who try and we push and then we give up because we don't feel like the dream, is going to
Yeah.
happen. So how are you able to keep that spark, stay persistent, stay consistent, stay motivated, stay in the game for that long?
Well, I'd be lying if I said I didn't have those moments where I wanted to walk away.
Yeah.
It happened several times throughout my journey.
Yeah.
And it literally could have happened right after I signed my first gig, my first deal at 17. After that situation didn't go the way that I had hoped, I didn't do music for a long time, because I'm like, okay, well, maybe it wasn't meant for me to do this. But I'm a firm believer in divine intervention. I'm a firm believer in there's no coincidences in life. And no matter where I went, there always seemed to be something that was bringing me back into it. Whether it's something as simple as singing at somebody's wedding or somebody's funeral, sadly, there was always conversation that would happen. Like, well, why aren't you doing whatever? And whatever excuses I could try to come up with in my head were not sufficient.
Mm.
Why I wasn't doing or using the gift that God gave me, except for those few moments here and there. And so, along the way, I remember being in DC, and this is just so random because it just popped into my head, but I remember being in DC. I took a cab somewhere, probably from my job at the time. And God didn't know me from a can of paint,
Mm-hmm.
but I felt that he was divinely positioned to kind of remind me that, God gave me a gift. And he said to me, he was said something to, and of course I'm paraphrasing, but it was something to the effect of, like, what are you going to do when you meet God and he asks you what you did with the gift that he gave you? And I'm like, I'm in a cab, minding my own business, kind of getting teary
Yeah.
eyed, because it's moments like that happen so many times in my life for people that didn't know me. And I know that it was nobody but God trying to remind me, like, yo, you've got to do something with this.
And you've hit on something so powerful because when we think of those types of scenarios, okay, when you die and you go to the pearly gates and God asks you, well, what have you done? What have you done good for this world? And what have you done good
Yeah,
for people? We don't stop to consider that God also was including, what have you done with the gifts that I gave you? Where
absolutely.
you would do, did you develop those talents? Did you make a life? Because every person on this earth is downloaded with a set of gifts
Man,
that will, number one, fulfill their own purpose, fulfill God's purpose for their life, and sustain them financially if they do it right. So yeah, so it's that's a powerful thing, and I think I really would have been taken aback too if
yeah.
someone asked me that question in that
And
moment.
so you factor in, at that time, I wasn't performing. That was actually in between the time I was at Howard. I was working to try to make money to get back into Howard and, trying to cover my rent and all these different things. And I hadn't been performing. And I'll just be honest, because I know at that time I kind of lost my self-confidence as well. Even though I went to Howard and sang in the choir, the Howard Chorale, and we had all these great opportunities to be amongst that many talented people constantly, you're kind of like, dang, it's kind of hard not to compare yourself to the people around you. I mean, obviously I was excited about the people that I knew that, got a deal here with Warner Brothers and did blah, blah, blah. But at the same time, like, dang, shouldn't I be doing better than what I'm doing? And the thought would be fleeting. And then I would just go on about my day. But then you encounter a random person and, it slaps you right in the face. You have no choice
right
but
back.
to take heed. So that also started me the process of learning my most major lesson I had to learn about the business. That by that time, I was wanting to get back into the business and realizing I had signed a contract at 17 that was going to basically be in effect for the rest of my life. I literally signed my life away, not knowing. I knew that I signed it, but in that moment, you're like, oh, well, it's okay because you have these dreams and these things are going to happen. And you just really thought, well, I'm where I'm supposed to be, right? And so I was in an R&B rap group. We were excited. We signed the deal. It was 17. The management company of the production company from the label essentially ran off with the money. We never got in the studio. Things never happened. And also, they were the people that told me not to go to college right after high school because we're going to be in the studio and da-da-da-da-da, which never happened. And so I learned a lot. I learned a lot about, putting all your eggs in one basket, about making those types of decisions without having like the business acumen. So when I was finally trying to get back into it, I consulted with an attorney and he helped me get out of that contract. But that forced me to kind of learn the business, learn to read contracts, learn to understand, like, yeah, it may seem like a great idea right now, but you got to make sure that you stay on top of the business side of it. It's one thing to be talented, but another to protect that talent. So anyway,
so what would you say to the artist who is getting in, just that information alone, like how are they able to navigate the business side of things?
And I've gotten this question several times from either a parent of a child that's trying to get into the business. And I don't care what it is, whether it's acting, whether it's singing, whatever. Oftentimes they want to put their whole heart into it. And I believe you should. But you should never sign a document without knowing what it truly, truly means. And I'm not saying everybody has to get a law degree in order to be an artist. Sure. But I think it's important to understand what those terms mean. It's important to understand. In my case, when I say sign my life away, what I signed was anything that I did, and I mean anything. If I started a clothing line, if I wrote a book, if I whatever, 50 years down the road, they would still be collecting money from it at that point. And case in point, a couple of years ago, one of my friends, she knows I've been in the business a long time. And she was like, my nephew is about to sign this management deal. And, they're super excited, but would you mind just kind of taking a look at it just to make sure that it's, and I said, listen, I don't mind looking. I said, but I'm not an attorney. And I can't give you true legal advice. But what I will do is take a look at it. If there's any points or anything that's on there that I feel like, no, you absolutely need to go back to the table with this one, I'll be glad to tell you. Do you know this particular contract was a management agreement between a manager and an artist? And that agreement stated that if that person owned a home, the manager was going to own a piece of the value of their home.
So you literally can sell your soul.
This kid was 17 years old and had no idea that this is what he would, that this is what he was potentially going to sign. And no offense to her, it's like she probably didn't even read it or know what she was reading. And I said to her, there's a lot of tricks out there where people are trying to do everything they can to make some money off of people's talents. And so I say all that to say that, if I had to give advice to someone, if you're in a position where you have the opportunity, even if it is to go to a community college, take some business classes just to learn accounting alone. There's simple accounting classes that you can take, because at the end of the day, even if you have an accountant taking care of your books, guess what? You need to be able to call one day and say, you know what, I'd like to see a copy of those, please, and
Yeah.
review and make sure that those it's being handled properly. And case in point, Steve Harvey,
Yeah.
somebody who paid people to do that, he had to find that out the hard way
That's
with
right.
with his tax bills.
That's right.
You pay somebody to do that job, but that doesn't mean you just like lay back and you let them take care of it. So I'm a firm believer in, if there's opportunities for you, and there are, no matter what city you're in, you have the opportunity, even if it's to take a class,
Mm-hmm.
learn the business side, even if you got an associate's degree in some sort of business management or something of that nature, because that's also going to prepare you for when you have to communicate with a promoter, you have to, with a publicist, with whatever. Oftentimes people just say, well, I just want to sing. Well,
Mm-hmm.
that's great, but it's music business for a
Yeah.
reason.
Yeah.
Business is a really key part of it. So I definitely, and I'll say this, I've been told that when I give that advice to tell someone, well, you really should, get some sort of business acumen, they'll say, well, doesn't that feel like you're planning for a plan B and thinking that plan A is not going to work?
No,
No,
it's
that's setting
solidifying your
yourself
plan
up.
A.
Exactly. Because worst case scenario, if it turns out that, say, you have maybe math and accounting is actually, that's your jizz. You know what I mean? Maybe you
Yeah.
have a really great mind that allows you to work with numbers and you're good at it. Guess what? That could be a side hustle for you while you're trying to fund your dream.
Yes.
You've got to think of ways that are going to be able to sustain yourself while
Yeah.
you're pursuing this dream, because honey, nobody's coming to save you, nobody's coming to cover your rent, nobody, none of those things are going to happen. And I don't mean to say that to sound pessimistic, but this is
Real.
somebody that's grown and has seen quite a bit,
Yeah.
and anyway, I do believe you have to hone your skill, but I also believe you've got to understand the business side.
And so you've answered my question a little bit, but one of the questions that I wanted to ask you was, is this how you came to be more of an indie artist
Mhm.
versus going the business route and signing with the major labels and things of that nature?
Right. So, of course, that experience with signing that signing that deal kind of hardened me towards signing a deal with a major label, but it did mean that I wasn't open to it. For me, it was like, if a situation had presented itself to me, and upon my initial review, looked like they really were about me as the talent and really had, saw my vision and were going to allow me to have some sort of creative input, because that's the other piece about getting a deal. You're
Yeah.
literally signing for them to do with you what they want.
Mhm.
Not always necessarily that they're going to consult with you and say, well, this is what we're thinking, what do you think? No, they're like, okay, this is what's making money over here, so we're going to duplicate that. And oftentimes that may not align with who you are as a person.
Yeah.
And so that is what really, in the end, prompted me to embrace being an independent artist. Because, yeah, that means I got to cover the expenses of everything. That means I've got to, I got to wear all these hats. But it also means that I can decide what music I want to do. I can decide what messages I want to put out there. And honey, me being a curvy,
Queen.
thickalicious, thickalicious queen, can decide how I want, my music videos. I want to be able to show, a man loving on a full figured woman,
Yeah.
because most times they're not going to do that. That wouldn't happen at a major label. They
Yeah.
would try to hide you and try to, I mean, look at Jill Scott. Like, that's what happened with her, where when she first came out, you couldn't deny the music, but marketing wise, they did it without showing her picture, because they knew how people were going to react. And I have to say this because it still ticks me off to this day, that when she was finally showing up to those radio stations, people were literally, this one station in particular, literally made cow sounds when she walked out of an interview. She posted about this a couple of years ago. She posted how she went and did the interview. They were being cordial with her while she was there. And as soon as she walked out, I guess they didn't know that her radio was going to be on still in the car that got picked her up. They played cow sounds. Anyway,
Kidding.
I am not. And when I tell you that ticked me off all over again 20 years later, but that's the business. That's the business. There's a million stories I could go on. Even someone that we know mutually that told me, you're a big girl, but I can make you sexy. I'm like, what does that mean? You know what I mean?
Don't need no help.
Listen, this is supposed to be about the music. At that time, I was really frustrated. But at any rate, there's a number of people that will try to get in your ear and try to, for the longest time, I was very confident in my, my gift and, all the different things. But after hearing all the stuff, the nitpicky comments and all that kind of stuff, it starts to weigh on you, right?
Yes.
So I think that is going back to how sometimes I would lose my momentum and be like, maybe I don't want to do this anymore. But I attribute, again, the random moments that happen. And just, again, full transparency, after I became a mother, I had people in my family telling me I needed to give it up. They told me I needed to stop doing music because, now you're a mother and now you've got to da 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 da. And here, this is not to say anything negative about those people, but it is to say that I had to really search within to say, okay, what is it that I really want to do? Because the truth of the matter is, my parents' generation, the older generation had their own way of looking at life. I know I have a different view of how life is. Talking to kids today, they're like, oh, that old lady is whatever. But the truth is I do believe you can have it all. You can have both, but it's not going to be without sacrifices. I'm so sorry. I need to pause for a second.
Okay.
All right. I apologize. So, let's pick up. I don't know where we left off.
Let's see. Okay. So one of the questions that we had, you were talking about staying true to self, not falling into the trap of, being recorded by a major label and then them kind of hurting you into whatever it is that was hot in the moment. So that was one of the questions that I had was, how are you able to, so, I'm sure there are plenty of artists that are out there that probably have their own sound and their own vibe and just, their own authenticity, right? But they get, bullied into trying to sound like everybody else. And that is difficult to try to navigate. So how were you? I mean, I know you are a strong-minded woman, right? So you weren't gonna let nobody tell you what to do. But but how are you?
Periods. But
other people who are facing that.
So what I would say is, even before you are even approaching a label or even considering entering into the field of music business, I would say decide for yourself the type of artist that you want to be. Decide for yourself, know who you are, the kind of artist that you are and what you want to do. And that way, when someone does approach you with something, you'll know, like your body, your inner gut will tell you, that doesn't feel right to me. Or, I don't think that that's going to work. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that you can't be open or flexible to maybe trying a new genre to add to your repertoire. But the current climate in the music business, it's very pointed towards a whole different thing that I know I'm not the demographic that they're going after. And I'm fully aware of that. But those artists, I want to believe that that's how they want to be portrayed. But to your point, I also know that if they were approached by someone and they know that this other artist that's very similar to that is making a lot of money for XYZ label, unfortunately, that's what gets pushed. So whether you're in this business because you want to be famous or you want to share your gift. Because if it's about fame, you can go do a whole lot of things. You can do a lot of things to try to make a little money and get a little name for yourself. But is that what you want long term? When you're 60, 70 years old, are the actions that you're taking right now things that you're going to be proud of? And is that the value you want to place on your life? And I know for some people when they're younger, that's too far away to even think about, because right now they're throwing this money in front of you like, it's now or never. But I think that if you're truly a creative, truly in your bag, as they say, you need to really know who you are as a person and as an artist. And really I had that conversation with myself before releasing the first album, because the other thing I was going to say is some of those songs from the first album, I had started writing them 10 years prior to that.
Wow.
And I had been sitting on them all that time. And the way I envision it is kind of like me and all the self-doubt and all the negativity and all the comments that were being made to me, telling me I was too dark, I was too big, I was, my sound was too mature. Nobody wants to hear that. And, and nobody wants to hear those types of lyrics. Nobody wants to hear real lyrics anymore. They just want to dance. And there's like so many things that have been said to me over the years. And, you start to internalize a little bit. But I finally had a conversation with myself, like, okay, this is not a competition between me and anybody else that's out there. This is a competition with me.
Yes.
And when I released my first album, or when I released my second album, my only competition was, okay, the next time I put something out, I want to get better each time. I want there to be some growth that I show each time. And that's kind of what I've stuck to, regardless of what everybody else is doing. I do still, like most creatives, I'm sensitive about my stuff. So I do get nervous when I'm about to release a product, but the motto that I have is, does it feel good to me?
Yes.
And if it feels good to me, that's what I put out. And that's kind of how people have to approach it when they're trying to get into the business. Like, what makes you feel good? What part of this potential career is going to make you feel good about it? Is it that you're able to dance and you're able to do these things? Then that's what you need to stick to. But if somebody's trying to sneak in, their desires for you, you've got to be so in tune with yourself that that's not right for me.
Yeah.
It's not easy. It's not easy to have that. Yeah. But that's the importance of that. And also the other side part is I had to decide what success was.
What that means to you.
What that means to me personally, because, growing up, success was to be just like, or have the same level of success as a Whitney Houston or Mariah Carey or all the artists that I watched, my entire life. And there came a time when, and it was around the time, I don't remember specifics, but it was around the time, Mariah was the most awarded artist at the time. And somebody had quoted whatever her worth was, in the millions at the time. I was like, dang, I got some work to do. Like, if I'm really trying to compete with that, I've got some work to do. But then I sat back and I'm like, okay, why am I trying to compete with something that wouldn't be apples to apples? What she and I are doing is two different things. And granted, it's the same, same type of music in some ways, but stop trying to compete with a major artist that has a machine behind her versus me being an indie artist.
One-man show.
Exactly.
Doing it all yourself.
Exactly. So that's the other part of also deciding what success looks like.
Yes.
For me, I already feel like I'm a successful artist.
Yes.
To those that don't know me, don't know my music, or even in my family for that matter, they may like, oh, well, she hasn't really had enough success. No, I really have, because there's millions of people in this world, right? Especially because of social media. I have been able to touch and reach people that I would have never met before. And they have found something in my music that they resonate with. That's a success to me.
Absolutely.
It doesn't mean that I'm going to quit my day job, but it means that I was able to reach someone else. And, anytime I get those kind of messages, or people, they're wanting to know when I'm coming back to London, for instance, that's another thing. Like, if it weren't for the fact of social media, I would have never had that tour in London and Paris in 2016. What are the odds? If somebody had told me, if somebody had told me when I first wrote those songs in 1999 for the first album, if somebody had told me then that I would have a fan base in London and in Paris and Japan and Africa, like all these different places, if somebody had told me, I'm like, okay, I know that's what I wanted, but I just didn't see it happening. So when it actually happened, again, you have to um, define what success is and honestly celebrate the small victories, because
Small victories. And
that's
from a creative standpoint, I feel like the foundation of success is simply not quitting. If you are continuing to go, if you're continuing to share your creative talents, your creative core, just who you are, your authenticity, you can do that until the day that you die and you have succeeded. If only one person has seen your body of work, you
absolutely.
just have not given up. Speaking of, your body of work, your creative process, you touched on something a little bit ago where you were saying that you wrote a song, you started writing a song 10 years ago, right? That just now is starting to see the light of day, or, would take 10 years. You writing a song today. So I guess it's a two-part question, sort of.
Okay.
The first part of it is like, what does that creative process look like when you're writing a song, from start to finish? What are some of the creative roadblocks you face? Because I know there are a lot of us creative people that are out there that want to write, but we are just a writer's block, creative block, whatever it is, mental blocks, whatever it is that we're going through in that moment that prevent us from really tapping into that. How do you overcome it? Like, what does that process look like, and how do you overcome any creative blocks?
So I'm going to answer it backwards with regards to, some of the roadblocks, because that's going to be key. And again, you learn this along the way, but it used to be that I could just, maybe a producer would send me some tracks because they wanted me, for consideration. They'd send me some tracks, and immediately, if something hits me, immediately melodies, lyrics start running in my head. I'm like, I'm ready to flow, and I literally go to my computer and I start recording my ideas immediately. I don't like to live with a song too long. I like to feel it. So if he sends me the track, I listen to like the intro and I see if it vibes with me. I stop it, and then I go and I record it. The ability to be able to do that has a lot to do with where I am in my own personal life, right? So the roadblocks, for me at least, are when there's too much clutter. Clutter could be stress from work, stress from kids, stress from your spouse, stress from just life in general, right? It could be your place in life. It could be your place in your family. Like, there's so many different things that can prevent you from being like just completely open-minded. And so that has happened to me several times where, like I said, my MO would be to get a song, immediately I vibe with it. Sometimes I could write 3 and 4 songs in one night.
Yeah.
It used to be that fluid. And then life started lifing. And then all of a sudden I could maybe write one line.
Yeah.
And I had nothing else left. But in real time, I didn't recognize what was preventing me from finishing the thought, literally. So, in hindsight, as I'm looking back on those phases where I had writer's block, I'm actually working my way out of it now. But there was a period, a good 4 years, when I could not write anything. And when I look back, I recognize that what was going on in my life was preventing me from just hearing anything. It was bad. It was a bad. And unless you're creative, I don't think you can understand what that feels like. But what it took for me to recognize that there was so much clutter in my life, like once that clutter was removed, I would hear a little bit here, I would hear like, oh, I have ideas. I'm at work and I'm hearing ideas and I'm jotting them down all of a sudden. Whereas before I didn't have any of that. The other thing I'd like to share is that oftentimes when I write a song, I know that I'm holding the pen, but I know it's not me. God is giving me that ammunition, if you will, in the
Mm-hmm.
words to write, to write the song.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a key thing there. Finding the balance in your spiritual life is a key part, but
Wow.
you also can't hear that if everything else is in the way of all those things. So people talk about, sometimes I can't hear him speak to me, when you're in prayer or whatever. It's the same thing for me when it comes to creativity, because if I am so bogged down with life and I can't hear his voice, I can't hear the melody that he gives me, I can't hear any of that. So finding that balance is so key. And again, full transparency, for me, it may not work for everybody, but
Mhm.
for me, what helped me is, there was a time where, I have some mental health challenges that have kind of gotten in the way of of just functioning in life sometimes.
Mhm.
And so I had to be hospitalized back in 2015. And it wasn't until I was in that setting, forced to look at myself in the mirror,
Just
take,
sit.
take inventory of all the things that got me there,
Wow. Yeah.
and realize, okay, that's not sustainable.
Mm-hmm.
It's not sustainable to think that all these hurdles and all these things that life is going to bring you, like if you do nothing about them as they come at you, they're going to stack up,
Yeah.
right?
Mm-hmm.
So the truth is that, yeah, life is going to life. Your kids are going to do what they're going to do. Your job is going to do what they're going to do, but you've got to find that thing, whether it's an outlet, whether it's that coupled with therapy, that coupled with, getting your health together,
Mm-hmm.
all kind of works together in order to remove that clutter in your life.
Okay.
And so that's the first thing that has to be in place in order for me to be able to write anything. Now, as far as the vibe for how I write,
Yeah.
the lights have to be off.
Okay.
I usually burn a candle,
Okay. Yes.
and maybe I shouldn't say that. But back in the day, I had some other little tricks that I used to do just because I had a sense of freedom that when you're young, you don't think about certain things anymore. But I don't do those things as much anymore. But going back to finding that balance, in order for me to have been able to have done 5 albums in the time that I have,
Mm-hmm.
and be a single parent to a special needs child, I had to invest in having equipment at home,
Okay.
because there are times I can't go to the studio all the time,
Yeah.
especially having a child with the needs that he had. So part of my ritual was putting him to bed, turning the lights off, light my candle, and try to get into that space.
And how were you able to do that after a long day's work? Just like you said, you have a son, you're a mother, you're ripping and running, still trying to find some sort of creative juice at midnight when you know you have to be up first thing in the morning. Like how? How in the world are you able to draw? What are you drawing from?
Right. So when you're on empty, you can't draw anything. You
Oh,
can't draw from anything.
boom.
So that's why it's important to find whatever your outlet is, find whatever things that help fill your cup, because otherwise you can't pour from an empty cup, right? So you can't help the spouse, you can't help your kids, you can't help your parents, you can't do those things if you have nothing to pour from, right? Same thing with creativity.
Yeah.
Now, don't get me wrong, I'd be dead tired sometimes,
Yeah.
but the adrenaline starts to flow, especially if I'm feeling it. If there's a track that I'm working on, or I'm inspired by whatever the message is in the
Yeah.
song,
Yeah.
I'll stay up all night if I have to. Now,
Okay.
being a woman of a certain age, I can't do that all the time. Let's be
Right.
clear.
Yeah.
Back in the day, I could literally stay up till 6 in the morning, sleep for an hour,
Oh,
get up and go to work.
I remember those days.
That's easy. Nah,
Trying to tell my husband about that. I'm like, babe, you don't understand. If you get in the studio, you don't have to sleep. You can record for 24 hours and not even see the light of day or know what time it is. I had another question for you. Oh my goodness, you touched on something. Oh, that I wanted to ask you. Oh my goodness, it's right at the tip of my tongue, and I'm gonna be so upset if when you start talking, I'm gonna think of it again, and then I'm gonna get.
it's okay. So
Oh,
while you're thinking about that, I'll share. just how in real time,
Yeah, like
having to try to drum up that motivation to write a song and come home from work and cook dinner and do all the things that I have to do to survive. A lot of it has to do too with the people you keep around you and the type of. I'm very big on energy, and I'm big on the people that I keep around me, even as it relates to social media. If I gotta mute somebody or I have to, because I'm a in order for me to function, my mental's got to be right. And it
yeah.
can't be right if I've got all these negative Nellies around me all the time. And they may not even direct their negativity towards me, but just being around negativity just doesn't work for me.
Or even people that don't understand a creative mind,
Not at
right?
all.
You could be surrounded by people who are like A-type, corporate America, you know what I mean?
Yep.
This is the steps you need to take to be successful and how to climb the corporate ladder. And they don't understand the creative mind, or they
At
look at
all.
that as something that's not considered to be success. That's also a damper. And they may have the
It
best of
is.
intentions,
It
right?
is.
That's
It
also
is.
a damper.
And that's kind of why I was also talking about drawing the distinction or a comparison between the generations too.
Yeah.
Because, like my parents grew up with the mindset of, oh, you get you a good job, good steady job, and that's living. You know,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
no, it's not. You know what I mean? Yes, you're able to sustain your family, but if you don't take that time for self-care, you don't take the time to do something that feeds your own cup, you're
Mm-hmm.
really not living. And I hate, I get into these debates all the time. And it's not to say that they're doing it wrong. It's just that's not how I choose to live. That's just not how I want to live. So in order to be open to that creative experience,
Yeah.
you've got to be able to tap into the things that are going to help fill your cup. And I think where I was going with that was when I wrote Good Morning Love, I prior to writing that song, I had not written an entire song in 4 years.
Sure.
I
Yeah.
had, wrote down ideas and stuff like that, but I had not written anything in, to me worthy of
Yeah.
of the world hearing about it. Um, I had songs that maybe I started a couple of years ago and finally finished them, in the last 4 years, but never something where I just sat down and I wrote. So I also do some like work for hire work. So I was talking about having those side hustles to
Yeah.
make sure that you can sustain yourself. I
Yeah.
also work with other creatives who
Okay.
maybe they don't do vocal production, but they need backgrounds on something, or somebody's a guitar player and they write songs and they wrote a song and they need a vocalist to demo it for them. I do those things. So I have another stream of income from that because, we just help each other. And
Yeah.
in some cases, they help me on my projects and vice versa.
Yeah.
So I was working on a friend of mine, her album's going to come out this year. I was working on her album. And every time she sent me a new song, I was like, dang, who produced this track? Like, it was just beautiful.
Yeah.
And, she told me his name. Every time I would get a new, we're like 6 songs in. And I'm like, gosh darn it, who is this person? I
Yeah.
must meet this person.
Yeah.
And at the time I was like, I'm done with this album. I'm really not looking to get anybody else to produce anything new, but I at least want to, talk to him and let him know that I really enjoy his music and that at some point I do want to work with him.
Mm-hmm.
And so she was like, oh, absolutely. You guys would be great. He's a fellow Aquarius, you just, you're going to love him, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, great. So she puts us in contact and we chat. And I said, I'm not in a position financially to do anything right now, but I definitely want to do something with you at some point. I just don't know when.
Yeah.
And I don't even know. And again, I was laying in my bed. Something told me, reach out to this guy.
Mm-hmm.
Random Sunday afternoon. I'm like, okay, and I'm saying to myself, you don't have any money. What are you doing?
Yeah.
And it was like, no, you need to reach out to him. Okay. So I sent him a message at 12 o'clock. We
Yeah.
agreed to have a conversation around 1:30, I think, 2 o'clock.
Mm-hmm.
Told him what the situation was. He was willing to work with me in terms of my payment, structure and all of that.
Mm-hmm.
By 3 o'clock, I had a new song.
Wow.
By 3 o'clock, I had the track from him, which ultimately became Good Morning Love.
I was just so okay. You hit on it.
And
You hit on
and
it.
so when I heard it, I heard the track, I was obsessed with the track.
Yes.
And all I kept hearing was like, oh my God, this is like really awakening something in me. I don't know. I don't know. I mean, these are my inner conversations, right?
Yes.
And then you add to that, a new love in my life.
Yes.
Love everything's wonderful and peaches and cream and, unicorns and rainbows and all that.
Yes.
And I listened to the track. I still didn't know where I was going with it yet, but I just knew this was I had to finish it.
Mm-hmm.
So that was a Sunday. Monday I go to work.
Mm-hmm.
I literally sit at my desk,
Mm-hmm.
and my love and I in the morning, every morning there's a text. It wasn't like it was always me that said it or it was him. It was just depending on who did it first or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And that particular morning he beat me to it, and he wrote "Good Morning Love"
You said that's it.
as I was listening to the track.
That's it.
And I was like, it I'd never written it in that way. I've never written a song in that way where the inspiration was literally right in front of my face. But as soon as that text came at the same time as I was listening to the track, I go, that's it. That's it. And
Wow.
so then I started writing, how I was feeling. But one of the things that I wanted to also say about that is initially I wrote it because it was stimulated by romantic love.
Yeah.
But what I want people to take from it, they can use it how they want to, right? It could be where you look at yourself in the mirror and say, "Good morning, love." And
Mm-hmm.
then, you know what I mean? You appreciate having woke up that day.
Yeah.
You've already won because you've opened your eyes. Like those are the lines that I was writing for that purpose.
Right.
But it also could be that you're acknowledging the fact that you're waking up and God said to you that morning, "Good morning, love.
Love.
Here's a gift for you. You get to wake up today." You follow what I'm saying?
I do.
So the inspiration comes from various places.
Yeah.
But baby, when it happened on that day, I was floored because again, I went 4 years without being able to write.
Yeah.
And I actually had written most of the lyrics that morning at my desk.
Mm-hmm.
Don't tell my supervisor. Um, and then and then by the following day, I'd gotten off work. I was so inspired. I wrote it and I recorded the demo to it, and I sent it to the producer. His name is Rodney Jones, by the way.
Okay.
Sent it. Okay, so I sent it to him that night as I, wrote down the demo, and he was like, "Whoa, like, when did you write this?" Like, because he had just given it to me the day before. And I said, and he knew, we talked about my day job and how difficult it was to have inspiration. Da 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 da. Next thing you know, I had the song, and the rest is history. So I really felt like that song was divinely planted.
Yes.
Not only with my introduction to Rodney, because it was his energy too that helped me kind of get into that space. But it was also what I felt was like just the jump start that I needed to like snap out of what was about to be a moment where I was going to say, "Yeah, I'm scrapping this whole album. I'm not going to do this." Because that's literally where I was.
It actually, so it speaks just to drive in the point that you were making earlier about the importance of decluttering your life. Because had you not had a clear headspace and been in a good mental space, you would not have been able to pick up on those little moments that were dropped on you, to be able to, this it's not to bring it all religious and everything, but like, God's voice is small and it's still, and you have to pay attention and your mind has to be clear in order to receive that, right? So it's the same thing when it comes to your creative talents. It's like they come in little droplets, just like you said, that little text message. If you woke up and had a bad morning or were stressed out about something or arguing with somebody or whatever, you wouldn't have had the mental capacity to look at that as your golden nugget to say, okay, this is the inspiration behind the song,
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I think that, to me, it's the key to everything. I mean, it's even the key to, maintaining a relationship even. You know what I mean? Because when you think about what clutter does, it can block every single thing. It can block, I always joke, I have a family member that I tell them that they are emotionally constipated. And I know that's a weird way to say it, but if you're emotionally constipated, I hate to keep saying that word, but it's the only way I can describe what I mean. You're numb.
Yes.
blunted. You have no, you don't have any reaction to any emotional stimuli, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think the moment that you declutter, and I'll leave it at that, you'll be able to feel things again. You'll
Yes.
be able to, because that's exactly where I was for those 4 years. I couldn't feel anything. Prime example, I released a song during that period of time that I'm talking about, a song called You Are. You got, we
Mm-hmm.
always talk about that. I wrote it, had written it actually a couple years before that, fine-tuned it, had to re-record it because I had an issue with my computer. My computer died and I lost everything and had to recreate it. And when I did it, I was trying to do a music video.
Okay.
And I was like, okay, so I need a treatment. I need to come up with like, how do I make this romantic view? My brain was so cluttered and emotionally constipated
Yeah.
that I couldn't even imagine like what does that look like? How do I come up with something romantic when I was numb. I couldn't feel anything. Of course, now I feel all the things. But
Yes.
back then I couldn't feel it. So, and I'm able to attribute that to removing some of the clutter. And, but it's not to give the impression that it's perfect. It's a day-to-day thing that has to happen,
Yeah.
because what you'll notice is in life things happen, and if you don't address it, all it does is just pile up on whatever the next thing that happens tomorrow, if you don't find a way to address it.
Yeah. So it's not necessarily, so you have to figure out how to your point, strike that balance, right? Because I know I've talked to other creatives, and a lot of I won't call them excuses necessarily, right? But because a lot of the times they're good reasons, especially when you're speaking to a creative mind. But there are a lot of creatives out there that feel that they have to have these perfect conditions in order to produce, right? I know writers that say, I can't write in my home. I need to
Mm-hmm.
go on a
Mm-hmm.
writer's retreat. I need to be away in the
Yeah.
mountains for a week, to even draw any inspiration. So it's not necessarily about having the perfect conditions. What's important is striking the balance between having the perfect conditions, but being intentional about balancing your life so that you have enough creative space to be able to
Yes.
generate magic, right? One more question, and then we'll close it on out, because my battery's about to die. Talking about
Right.
like, I don't want to lose all this. This is, oh my goodness, this is such good information. All right, we are back. We're having all kinds of technical challenges, but we're gonna get through this interview because I still got more questions. I feel like we need to do a part 2 because
I know. I'm with it.
so much
Whenever.
amazing information. Oh my goodness. Thank you so much again for doing this. One more question that I wanted to make sure that I asked you had to do more with the monetize aspect of things. I was talking to another young lady. I'm not sure if you saw the interview. She's a model. She's just stepping into the modeling scene. And so, we kind of touched on, okay, are you making money? And if so, how are you doing it? Right? Because there's a lot of creatives that are out there that want to monetize their talents.
Yeah.
You've been doing it for years, right? So
Yes.
can you just maybe share like 1 or 2 nuggets on how the rest of us creatives can kind of break through into that world where we actually start making money? And I'm sure a lot of it ties into understanding the business, but like also, how do you sell yourself? How do you
Yeah.
get the confidence to be able to price yourself according to your worth? How do you even ask the question? You know what I'm saying?
Right.
All those things, instead of just wanting to just give yourself away for free.
So I'll be honest with you, a lot of my approach has a lot to do with my experience in corporate America, and how drafting an email literally is their first point of contact, right? And if you consider that if you're going to reach out to a venue and you want to play there, you've got to consider they're not going to give a whole lot of time to the email. You've got to capture their attention. So you got to make sure you've got some digital products there, but whether it be a photo or a link to a music video or something that's going to sell you, right? But in that email, you have to position it like you're having a business meeting with someone quickly, right? So you have to be able to capture their attention. Now, it's not foolproof because everything is about timing. Everything is about whomever's in charge, the talent buyer or whatever. So that's one thing that I will say, that you need to make sure that you draft. And even if you use the same copy and paste for all the people that you reach out to when you're starting your campaign, that's one of the things that you want to make sure, that when you're sending an email, you need to make sure that it has punctuation and that people are able to understand exactly what you're selling. One of the other things is, I've always said this, that even, yes, you don't want to do a whole bunch of free shows all the time, of course, because you've got bills to pay. But if you are agreeing to do a free show for someone, or you're doing a charity event, you want to make sure that you have the ability to record that performance and use that as your business card for your next gigs. Because yeah, you want to make money for every show that you do, but at the same time, if say you're performing somewhere and it has a great venue, they've got great lighting, all you got to do is get somebody to record it for you so that you have quality footage. That's what you're going to use to be able to get to book those shows. Same thing with putting information on your social media. You want to make sure that you have footage of your performances. I saw somebody, a label person, say, yeah, I get emails all the time, or inboxes all the time, for people that want us to take a look at their music, but I go to their IG and there's nothing on their IG that shows that that person's a singer. There's no videos, there's no nothing. So you have to constantly market yourself, and it is an exhausting process. I will not lie to you, but that is the main thing that you've got to do, is view every single activity that you're doing as a means, a business card, a means for somebody to get to know who you are. And we're in the day and age now, which I need to do better about it, but we're in the day and age now where people want to get to know you as a person as well. So it's not just you showing videos of you singing, like, your personality, your conversation, certain things that are happening, a day in the life, those types of things. That's the main thing. Of course, I don't present myself to be a guru, but I will say one of the mistakes that I made, and I want to encourage somebody who's in the business or just getting in the business, one of the mistakes that I made early on is I didn't really embrace the YouTube movement early on when I first released my first music, and I should have. I didn't understand it at first, but had I done it then when I was the hottest, I'd have a little bit more traction as it relates to YouTube. So utilize those channels, because you'd be amazed at how many people you can reach that way. But also, if you're able to get your numbers up, then you literally can monetize the assets that you put up there.
Okay. Okay. Absolutely. Absolutely. That was excellent. The question that I had earlier actually did pop back up into my head.
Okay.
And that had to do with creative outlets. You were saying earlier that it is so important for you to maintain a creative outlet. I heard someone say, and I just wanted to kind of get your thoughts on this one at some point. They said, if you work a full-time job and you have this creative outlet, right? And then you start to monetize this creative outlet, you now need to find another creative outlet, because now your initial one has your side thing has become your main thing. So you need
to
you need to find another side thing. So how important is that? And is that something that you do?
Well, and I think it is important. It kind of goes in line with what I was saying too, about just coping with life. I have a psychology background too, where it's important for you to have those outlets in order to process what life happened. Life is going to life, and you need to have those things. And so the moment that you turn your hobby, let's say, into a business, okay, now it's a business. Now it doesn't have the same medicinal powers that it once had. Prime example, I started painting during the pandemic. I don't profess to be a great artist, but some of the items that I've created, I'm toying with selling some. I've had actually people ask me to paint some for them. But, the moment that, say, somebody wants me to commission, like they wanted to commission something with me, then the pressure's on, the stress is on, because now it's a business, as opposed to me just doing it to kind of keep my anxiety down, because that's essentially what I was doing during the pandemic. And there wasn't a timeline. It wasn't a deadline associated with it. It was just because I wanted to flow with it. There's so many different things that you can do that are just solely for you. And I think it's so important for you as a person to have that. But the moment that it becomes something where you got a deadline associated with it, you know, you got to make enough to be able to sell, it changes the dynamic of what the purpose of that is. And so I absolutely agree.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I thought so. I thought so. Because, you know, there's so many people out there, like you said, who they now make that creative thing their main thing. And then it changes the dynamic of that altogether and makes it a lot more difficult to, you know, to enjoy it.
And don't get it twisted. Being an entrepreneur is not for the weak.
No.
You know what I'm saying?
No.
You know, so the work, it's a lot. It's a lot. So the moment that you decide to go into that arena, no matter how big or small, you know, it's a major feat that you're taking on. And so that's more, I don't know where you're going to find the time. If it's hula hooping for 5 minutes a week, then that's what you do. You know what I mean? You've got to find that moment for yourself somewhere in the day.
Absolutely. Terry, you have given us so much in this short amount of time. I have to bring you back, please, for part 2. Just, of course,
whenever.
A wealth of knowledge and wisdom, but also because I'm greedy and I need some more face.
Anytime, you know I love you.
Thank you so much for being on here. Before we go, please tell the people how to find you, what you got going on now, all of that.
Yes, so on Instagram, it is I am Teri Tobin, TeriTobin. Facebook, you can spell out my name. Musically, you can find all my music on all digital platforms.
Okay.
You can also find my music on Bandcamp. So that would be teritobin.bandcamp.com. Okay. My website is currently under reconstruction at this time, but you can always catch me on socials. And as far as what's up next, I'm still, you know, promoting Good Morning Love, of course. I have a new single that's coming out called Curves.
Okay.
It's designed to have the conversation about body positivity.
I love that.
Because so many times we don't get the opportunity to celebrate all the shapes and sizes that we come in. And those of us that are on the thicker side, most of the times people only want us to be like the crazy girlfriend on a TV show, or like the crazy best friend or whatever. We're never the love interest. We're never, you know,
the main character.
Exactly. Honey, and I got main character energy. Let me just be with you. So again, going back to being an independent artist and having creative control, I get to put out the images and the messages that I want to put out. And so my next venture will be to release this song called Curves that I did with David P. Stevens. So be on the lookout for that. And of course, my album Forever will be out sometime this year. My goal is to get it done by the end of this first quarter. So let's, you know, pray that, you know, all the funding comes in and we're able to get it knocked out. And so I'll have some new music.
Yes, definitely a part 2, because I want to unpack that. Okay, how do you secure the funding? How are, you know, more about the creative journey and your creative process, and more about overcoming the roadblocks. And I mean, there's just so much more conversation to take place.
Absolutely.
Thank you for this time. Thank you for
spending so welcome. It with us. It is a pleasure. I'm so proud of you, and I just appreciate being a part of your journey.
I love you. Thank you.
Love you too. Thank you.
Gentlemen, Ms. Teri Tobin.